Welcome to the Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you for joining me. So I have just recently gone through the entire Alien franchise and reviewed every single movie leading up to the release of Alien Romulus. And now to officially cap off the entire review series, I want to give you my official ranking of all 9 movies in the Alien franchise. So that's what we're doing today. Let's do it. So kicking things off at number 9, the worst of the worst for me is going to be AVP, Alien vs. Predator. And this to me is the most forgettable one in the franchise. It's just all around pretty terrible. It's so unmemorable and forgettable. It's one of the most bland, boring looking films I've ever seen. Everything about it is just gray. I said in my review for it that this is the movie equivalent of looking at a dark gray overcast sky for 90 minutes. It's all very uninteresting. The characters are pretty terrible. The dialogue is dumb, and it's PG-13, so you don't get any good kills. It's just all around a pretty unmemorable, terrible experience that I have absolutely no desire to ever return to this thing. And that is why it's at the very bottom of my list. Next up at number 8, and this one barely edges out the bottom spot, but it's going to be AVP Requiem. And really the only reason why it barely edges out the previous entry is because at least you have an R rating here and you have a couple decent kills. Like is a strong word. I feel like there's not really much here that I would say I like, but I think the scene where the xenomorph goes into the hospital, into the maternity ward, and like impregnates the women with a bunch of baby aliens is pretty gnarly. So you get kind of a cool sequence there. The one scene where the girl gets pinned to the wall with like the Predator throwing star is all right. But yeah, there's a couple parts in here that are at least somewhat enjoyable. Pretty much everything else about it, though, is not great, to say the least. Yes, it's way too dark. Yeah, there's a whole lot of this that you can't see. I don't know what the cinematographer was thinking, but it's simply way too dark. And you run into a lot of the same issues in this one as you do with the previous one. Just stupid dialogue, stupid characters, very forgettable and unmemorable stuff. And yeah, it's another one that I don't ever plan on rewatching, and I don't really feel like saying much more about it, so let's move on to number 7. Coming in at number 7 for me, and I'll say we're moving up a tier here at least, but it's going to be Alien 3. And this is a film that is kind of a bummer looking back on in hindsight because of David Fincher being, I think, one of the best directors working today, and he has been for quite some time now, that this happened to be the very first film that he ever made. And so the studio and the, production company didn't trust him, and they basically just told him to kick rocks after he finished filming it. And then they took over and completely butchered this thing. And so it's a bummer that it went down that way. I would have really loved to see what his vision would have been in the movie we would have gotten if they would have gave him full creative control. I think it probably would have been significantly better than the one we got. Now, when I went through this, I reviewed the assembly cut, which is the cut that includes a lot of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, spends more time with some of the inmates and getting into some of their kind of religious, philosophical, belief system and things like that. But look, this is a film that it's competently made. You can see Fincher's talent behind the camera. There's some nice visuals here. I like the prison setting. I think it kind of has just this dark, grungy quality to it all that I think it has some nice atmosphere. I think Ripley here is pretty good, but the big things that really hinder Alien 3 are, first off, deciding to kill the characters of Newt and Hicks right from the get-go really sucks. Those are two characters that James Cameron spent, such a good amount of time with in Aliens, really developing and got you to care about them. And then for them to just be treated so disrespectfully and get killed off screen to start off the next movie is a really big bummer. So it immediately starts off the film and puts a bad taste in your mouth, which is never a good thing. And then some of the alien effects are pretty terrible. I just actually recently found out, though, I thought the alien here, at least some of the alien shots were CGI, but I guess I just learned that they're actually, it's like a puppet that was filmed over a green screen. Either way, it looks pretty terrible, and a lot of the shots of the alien, they just have aged really poorly, and it doesn't do this film any favors. And so, yeah, this one is kind of a mixed bag. There are some things that I like. There's some things that I don't really like, but still a little bit more on the negative side with Alien 3. And really, my kind of overall perspective on this one is just that it's kind of a bummer and a missed opportunity, because I feel like what could have been is something really great, given whose hands this film was ultimately in, but it just didn't pan out that way. And that's why Alien 3 is my number 7. All right, coming up next at number 6 is going to be Alien Resurrection. And this is a film that I feel like I could almost call a bit of a guilty pleasure. There's a lot in this that's kind of terrible, but there is some stuff in it that this movie is kind of almost so ridiculous, it's kind of fun and entertaining, at least parts of it are. There's about a 30 to 40 minute chunk in the middle of the movie that I have a bit of fun with and that I think is pretty entertaining. I really like Brad Dourif in this, the small role that he has. I think he's pretty good. This one too it's got some decent kills in it. I like the underwater sequence is fun, and then the sequence that follows after that, where they're kind of climbing up the ladder and trying to escape, is kind of fun. Leland Orser, another small role, but he's kind of memorable and has a decent little role in this that I like. And so there's some fun stuff in here, but like I said, there's definitely some aspects here that are pretty terrible. I'm not really a big fan of hardly any of the characters, and even Ripley here is so kind of off character that it's just not the same Ripley. And so you're kind of like, all right, I kind of like her character because it's Ripley, but it's sort of not. And so that part's not great. I'm not a big fan of Ron Perlman or Winona Ryder's performances here. And finally, the white xenomorph hybrid at the end is pretty terrible and atrocious. But like I said, there's at least a chunk in the middle here that I can have some fun and entertainment with. And so for me, that at least causes this to edge out the previous entry with Alien 3. And I just get a little bit more entertainment out of this one, even if it's from kind of having fun with some of the bad aspects of it as well. So that's why Alien Resurrection is my number 6. All right, next up at number 5 for me is going to be Alien Covenant. And Alien Covenant is another kind of mixed bag. I like the visuals. I like Ridley Scott's his eye and his visual presentation here. I like how really gnarly and nasty and bloody this one is. This is still probably the goriest and bloodiest film out of all 9 of these. And so you get some pretty gnarly, body horror type stuff. That's always fun. And I really like Michael Fassbender here, and you get a double dose of him. So I'm always down for that. I really like his character, David, and then Walter also is good. And so Fassbender really, I think, helps carry this thing and is kind of the biggest highlight and positive element for me in Alien Covenant. The negatives for me on this one, though, and this is still one, I'm a little bit more on the positive, but still kind of mixed overall, is you just get some really stupid characters making stupid decisions that are really aggravating and irritating. And some of the biggest offenders in this are, they find this planet that kind of just pops out of nowhere, that, they just spent years scanning for potentially habitable planets, and all of a sudden they just happen to find one, and it's like, oh, they're right next door to it. And then it's like, I know they're going to a planet that they think is habitable, but it's still an alien planet that's been totally unexplored, and they decide to go down there and explore without any sort of protection, no space suits, no nothing. And to me, it's kind of indefensible. It's unforgivable. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I don't know how in the world nobody would have thought like, hey, maybe we should put on some spacesuits because there could be some potential problems here. But they don't do that. And then, of course, you get a couple of the crew who get infected. when the two girls bring the one guy back to the medical bay, and I mean, he's completely freaking out and, you know, having all sorts of seizures, and I mean, just going crazy. They have no idea what's wrong with him. And then the one girl is like trying to comfort him and soothe him and give him a hug. And it's just like, what in the world are you doing? Man, if that was me, I'd stay as far away as possible from this guy, man. And so there's just some stuff in this movie where characters do some stuff that is pretty stupid. Overall, though, I do think the positives still do outweigh the negatives with this one, but it is kind of a mixed bag. All right, we've reached the top 4, and I've been kind of wrestling with numbers 3 and numbers 4, which order to put them in. But for right now, at least, and if you ask me tomorrow, I might flip them the other way, but for right now, number 4 for me is going to be Prometheus. And Prometheus is a film that I really appreciate the ambition of it. I really like the new, fresh, creative concept and idea that Ridley Scott had with this prequel type movie, that he really did something different and tried to open up the alien universe and explore a whole new different thing, which I really appreciate. This one kind of has a bit more of a philosophical, kind of thought-provoking approach to it, which I really like. Kind of gets into just some interesting ideas and themes about, you know, humanity's creation and our place in the universe and things like that. And so all that stuff I really like. I really like just the overall mystery to it all of him trying to put things together. And I love really just the opening sequence too, how mysterious it starts off. It's like we're introduced to this brand new creature. We don't know what's going on, but it's really fascinating and interesting. And so I really like the mysterious type presentation to this. And I also love Michael Fassbender as the character of David. He is my favorite character in this entire franchise, right behind Ripley, of course. But I find his character so fascinating and interesting in kind of looking at where do his loyalties really lie? What's his motivation? Is he just simply following his programming? Or does he almost have his own kind of free will actions and stuff like that? And so I think Fassbender is great in the role. The visuals here I think are really fantastic. Really my only negatives with this one are some of the similar negatives to Alien Covenant is that there are some stupid decisions that are made. Some of the characters do some dumb stuff. It's not as egregious, I think, as Covenant is, but there is some dumb decision making here. But that doesn't hinder my enjoyment from Prometheus too much. I really enjoy this film. It's a film I remember seeing back in the theater, and I have continued to revisit it a handful of times throughout the years, and it's one that, having just rewatched it again recently, it still holds up pretty well, and I have a pretty good time with Prometheus, and so that's why right now it is my number 4. All right, coming in at number 3, and I'll admit it's possibly because of a little bit of recency bias, but I'm still riding high on the emotions of Alien Romulus. And look, this is one I can fully acknowledge and understand some of the issues and the complaints that people have with it. Yes, it's a safe film. In a lot of ways, it retreads some familiar territory and things that we've seen before. So I fully acknowledge that. It's just, man, Fede Alvarez's direction in this is so stinking good that I didn't really care all that much that it was a more safe approach. I just thought he directed the heck out of this thing, and the intensity levels throughout the second half of this movie are cranked up to 11 for like the whole second half. And man, I was just fully locked in and totally engaged throughout pretty much this entire thing. Everything from the sound design and the music and the editing is very effective. He just squeezes every last drop of tension out of so many of the scenes. I love that he went kind of throwback old school with a lot of the technology, sort of analog old school technology, that this really fits well in between those first two Alien movies. And of course, I love that he went predominantly practical effects. The characters, with the exception of a couple, I fully acknowledge are not really much. They're not all that fleshed out. They kind of just exist to sort of be cannon fodder for the alien sort of thing. But I do think Kaylee Spaney's character and the android Andy, man, I really liked their characters. I thought they were very well handled. I really liked their relationship and some of the conflict and the tension that arises out of their relationship. And so, yeah, I had a really good time with Alien Romulus. It was a lot of fun. and I quite enjoyed it. And so that's why, for right now anyways, it's at my number 3. All right, the top 2 are probably no surprise, as I would imagine these are probably the top 2 for the vast majority of fans anyways. But which order are they going to go in? And to be perfectly honest with you, this is basically a coin toss. These could flip-flop like, every other day kind of thing. It just kind of depends what particular mood I'm in that day. Do I want something a little more horror, or do I want something a little more action? And so I think in terms of quality, these are about as high quality as it gets. They're both certified absolute all-time classics in my book. But I gotta pick. So today, right now, this very minute, my number 2 is going to be Aliens, the sequel from 1986, directed by James Cameron. And this, to me, is a white-knuckle thrill ride. This is sci-fi action at its absolute peak. And man, this is such a fun and entertaining movie to watch. And this really speaks to James Cameron's ability as a director to take something as fantastic as the original Alien and then follow it up with a sequel and do something with really a different type of flavor by making it a little more action-centric, right? And I just really love what he does. I like the new characters. I really like what he does with Ripley's character here with regards to her relationship with Hicks a little bit, but especially her relationship with Newt, as you get to see, you really get to see, I think, kind of the full range of Ripley's character here as she becomes more fleshed out and developed in this film, where you see her as the strong, big, tough leader, but then you also see kind of the softer, maternal, loving, caring side of her as well. It really just endears us to the character of Ripley, and it's one of the things that makes her so great. And so I really like what Cameron does with her character in this. And look, there's nothing I can say about the action scenes in this movie that hasn't been said. They're absolutely fantastic. They're so much fun. Bill Paxton in this is great. He makes me laugh. I get a kick out of him. I also really like Lance Henriksen as Bishop. I think he's also another good character. And the final half hour of this movie is action movie making at its very peak. When you got Ripley going in there on the rescue mission to get Newt, and then that scene when she finds herself amongst all the eggs and the sound cuts out and the camera pans around as Ripley, turns over and looks as she's staring face to face with the alien queen. Man, if that doesn't put just a big old smile on your face, I don't know what would. It's fantastic. It's an absolute classic, and that's why Aliens is my number 2. But of course, number 1, for today anyways, is the original Alien, of course, directed by Ridley Scott. And look, this movie is, as I said, Aliens is like sci-fi action at its peak. This is horror of the highest level. And this is a film where the visuals are fantastic. The atmosphere is fantastic. And it introduces us to probably the greatest horror creature ever. And the design of the alien is so phenomenal. This is a film that's endlessly rewatchable. It has aged like a fine wine. It never gets old. I never get tired of watching it. There's just so many memorable and iconic scenes, with the face hugger to the chest buster. I mean, this was the very first chest buster scene, and I still think it's the best one. It's phenomenal. I've never seen anything like this before. I wish I could have been alive in 1979 and old enough to see this in the theaters. Man, I just wish I could have. But anyways, it just holds up so well. And it's such an exercise in great atmosphere. And I love what Ridley Scott here, how he handles sound. And a lot of it, the lack of sound. This movie is so quiet in so many places, but his usage of sound and the restraint creates such a fantastic mood and atmosphere. So many great scenes. The whole final sequence with the countdown, to the ships exploding, to just the craziness of Ripley running through the halls with the smoke and the lights and the sound. It's just great. And then the whole final sequence when she gets into the escape pod, we finally get to breathe that sigh of relief, only we find out, no, that we can't, because of course the alien's inside the escape pod with her. It's just great stuff, man. It's endlessly rewatchable. What else is there to say? It's an absolute classic, and I love it. So there you go. There's my official alien ranking video. Hit me up down below. Let me know how you rank these things. Would love to hear from you. Appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. If you got anything out of this video, go ahead and do me a favor and do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.